Out of Valve's entire library of innovative and groundbreaking experiences, perhaps no game has had as big an impact as Portal. This scrappy little game, the smallest piece of a massive bundle, managed to blow past its audience and reach the masses in a way few games have ever done, before or since. For years after its release, the references, the videos, the fan games, and especially the memes were all over the internet.
Hello, and again, welcome to AskGlados.com.
But how? Since then, we've seen games rise and fall in the public consciousness over and over. All of these trendy, casual games, usually with a mobile release, a multiplayer component, or both. And even back then, in the late 2000s, we'd at least expect to see it on Wii or something. But Portal had none of that. It was a short, single-player game, covered in this oppressive and isolating atmosphere, and could only be found on the core gaming platforms of the time. It was primarily built by only a few people, students in fact, fresh off an impulse hire by Valve's CEO. And this was the smallest game in a collection featuring a new Half-Life game, the previous two just to catch you up, and Team Fortress 2, a huge multiplayer shooter with a ton of personality. And this was 2007. Do you know what else came out in 2007? All of these! By all accounts, Portal should have been a cult classic at most. So I ask again, how did this thing manage to break through to the cultural zeitgeist? Well, let's find out. So first of all, for a game to get big, it has to be seen by a lot of people, have some kind of hook, or just be really good. Most games have one or two of these. No Man's Sky was advertised with a massive open world, Five Nights at Freddy's and Minecraft were unique and all over YouTube, PUBG puts 100 people on one map at once, and so on. Portal had all three. Initial interest was built with an ad campaign, funded by Valve, that made a big deal out of the portals themselves. Shipping in a bundle was both a blessing and a curse. People might focus on the other huge titles, or boot it up to cool down after an intense afternoon sniping on 2 Fort. So what's the hook? Well, it's right there in the name. Portals are really cool. Apparently playtesters had some issues wrapping their heads around them, but I find them very intuitive.
Speedy thing goes in, speedy thing comes out.
By now, people get this. It's not a big concept anymore, and it's been used in a ton of games since. Portal brings the mechanic front and center, and shows off all kinds of interesting uses for them, with a variety of other mechanics to complement and build puzzles around. And that brings us to the gameplay itself. Portal doesn't just have good puzzles, it has an extremely smart way of presenting them to the player. See, one of the major goals of good level design is to teach the player how everything works as simply and naturally as possible. Mario is the most famous example here. The game begins with a bit of time to learn the basic controls, then presents the player with an enemy they have to jump over in an area where they're likely to hit a block. Then they get a mushroom, which moves so a new player can grab it without even trying. It seems so simple, but if any of these elements were moved or changed, the player would be learning things much more slowly. A ton of great games use this type of subtle guidance to teach players, including Valve's own. Even TF2's notoriously awful training mode sneaks in a natural crouching section. Portal takes this sort of seamless tutorial and uses it for most of the game. If you get a chance, I'd seriously recommend playing the game with developer commentary.
It's absolutely critical that players quickly wrap their heads around what a portal is. We noticed early playtesters grasped the concept much more quickly when they caught a glimpse of themselves through a portal, so we deliberately positioned this first portal to ensure that players will invariably see themselves.
The first chamber is a basic button tutorial, the next teaches players that portals can move, and then they're given access to the portal gun. At first it can only make blue portals, but about halfway through the player gets an upgrade. Between chambers 1 and 11, the game takes time to teach players just about every major mechanic, all in natural and streamlined ways. These early chambers are only 1 or 2 puzzles, and serve as little more than a tutorial, while later tests can get far more complicated. In order to make the chambers as clear as possible, just about all visual noise was eliminated. Early versions of the game looked more like a Half-Life 2 mod than anything else. Later revisions used lines and bright white buttons, before settling on a simple yet effective design language. Puzzle elements are rounded, or use bright colors, making them easy to identify. Red buttons, detailed cubes, circular doors, and dotted lines connecting them. Portals can be placed on white surfaces, but not the darker ones, and more subtly, tiles are used to indicate where portals should be fired for best results, among other small and natural hints to aid the player. It retains this laser focus on gameplay, but still has enough detailing and wear to the environments to feel like a real place. Unlike traditional games with scripted narrative set pieces, the player moves through Portal at their own pace, with only the briefest of breaks for loading. It's also Valve's shortest game. I can beat it casually in 45 minutes, and the speedrun is just 6.5. No time is wasted. Every inch of this game has a purpose. Unfortunately, simplicity doesn't leave much room for visual spectacle, and design alone isn't enough for a game to grow as big as Portal did. Fortunately though, it has much more to offer. Like the Half-Life games before it, Portal uses its storytelling to motivate the player and give it a real personality of its own. Set in a futuristic research facility, Portal has the perfect excuse to use its mechanic and split up every puzzle. With only one voice present in this
Aperture Science Computer-Aided Enrichment Center.
The game motivates players with a simple promise.
Cake.
You play as a silent young woman who goes completely unnamed in-game. Listening to these seemingly pre-recorded messages and looking around at these empty viewing areas gives players a sense of isolation. It starts to bring up questions. Are you really being tested? The elevators keep moving, taking you to even more chambers. How big is this place? Where are you really? While the chambers look relatively sterile, there's still visible wear and tear on all of the panels. It almost seems abandoned. The tone established early on makes the player feel both incredibly alone and as if they're being watched. It's helped along by an excellent ambient score from Kelly Bailey. And as the game goes on, the tests grow dangerous. First, it's unstable energy pellets, then rooms flooded with a toxic substance, finally culminating in a
live fire course designed for military androids. The Enrichment Center apologizes for the inconvenience and wishes you the best of luck.
Something clearly isn't right in this place, and if you take a deeper look, yeah, you don't want to be here, and you definitely aren't getting that cake. This evolution of tone and mood is best displayed in Chamber 17.
The vital apparatus vent will deliver a weighted companion cube in 3, 2, 1. This weighted companion cube will accompany you through the test chamber. Please take care of it.
The entire map revolves around this cube. It is your shield, your key, the only friendly face you've seen so far. In only a few short minutes, the game makes sure that you grow attached. Depending on your state of mind, it's either endearing or just kinda funny.
The symptoms most commonly produced by Enrichment Center testing are superstition, perceiving inanimate objects as alive, and hallucinations. The Enrichment Center reminds you that the weighted companion cube will never threaten to stab you and, in fact, cannot speak.
And then, upon reaching the goal with your faithful companion cube,
you did it. The weighted companion cube certainly brought you good luck. However, it cannot accompany you for the rest of the test and, unfortunately, must be euthanized. Please escort your companion cube to the Aperture Science Emergency Intelligence Incinerator.
And this is shockingly effective. I can't tell you how many times I've seen someone get genuinely emotional in this scene. In many ways, the developers were conducting a test of their own, seeing if they could make players fall in love with an inanimate object using only a few simple lines of dialogue, manipulating them in much the same way the facility manipulates its subjects. And it worked.
You euthanized your faithful companion cube more quickly than any test subject on record. Congratulations.
It really alters the tone of the game going forward, and ensures that players are unified in sadness and anger. As players near the end of the final chamber, they don't know what's around the corner. Now, if there were a slice of cake, maybe a couple reskinned Half-Life citizens, and the game just ended there, it would still be a solid, entertaining video game, easy 8 out of 10. But what the game does next pushes it over from great to one of the best ever made.
Congratulations. The test is now over. All Aperture technologies remain safely operational up to 4,000 degrees Kelvin. Rest assured that there is absolutely no chance of a dangerous equipment malfunction prior to your victory incandescence. Thank you for participating in this Aperture Science computer-aided enrichment activity. Goodbye. What are you doing? Stop it. You're pleased that you made it through the final challenge where we pretended we were going to murder you.
It's so much in such a short time. The music, the intensity, the total shift in tone. Oh, is just such a good moment. And the reveal that these messages weren't pre-recorded completely changes your perception of the entire game. I'm not sure if anything like this has ever been done quite so well. This whole final act of the game, taking the player behind the scenes of the facility, is masterful, bringing a new sense of control and breaking the rules after so many structured test chambers. The devs hid the twist so well that this part doesn't even appear in the chapter select. Puzzles here feel far more natural, making use of flinging techniques in the environment to truly start challenging players. All the while, the malignant AI tries to get through to you, turning from persuasion to anger and threats.
I'm going to kill you, and all the cake is gone.
Like the player, she is unnamed in-game, but because of this final act, GLaDOS has become one of the most popular villains in history. Here, she ceases to be a funny set of pre-recorded messages, and becomes the cause of all of your trials and tribulations. It could be argued that Ellen McLain's performance is the single most important aspect of the entire Portal series.
Sarcasm. GLaDOS is sarcastic a lot. And that's so much fun. But while I was trying to do this, trying to build in all these emotions, I still had to maintain the computer sound and maintain the pronunciation of repeated phrases. You know, aperture science and the enrichment center.
And, upon reaching the true final chamber, you see your assailant in person.
Well, you found me. Congratulations. Was it worth it? Because despite your violent behavior, the only thing you've managed to break so far is my heart.
And the game ends in a bitter fight.
Good news. I figured out what that thing you just incinerated did. It was a morality core they installed after I flooded the enrichment center with a deadly neurotoxin to make me stop flooding the enrichment center with a deadly neurotoxin. So get comfortable while I warm up the neurotoxin emitters.
Dangerous challenges made tense under a strict time limit, with an endless barrage of insults.
I invited your best friend, companion Cube. Of course, he couldn't come because you murdered him. All your other friends couldn't come either because you don't have any other friends, because of how unlikable you are. It says so right here in your personnel file. Unlikable.
Structuring the battle around incinerating her is some pretty good revenge for the Cube, too.
Don't believe me?
Here, I'll put you on.
That's you. That's how dumb you sound. You've been wrong about every single thing you've ever done, including this, baby. You're not smart. You're not a scientist. You're not a doctor. You're not even a full-time employee. Wait, you're like that so long. I'm trying to trust me. I think it changes. It's not going to get better. But come on up.
The game ends with a well-deserved sense of finality, rest, and freedom. Ripped away in an update to tease a sequel, but for a while, this was the end. You even get to have your cake. And then, for the credits, a song.
This was a triumph. I'm making a note here. Huge success.
Now, honestly, it's a bit odd to end a game with a nice little song about how the villain is still alive, but it works. Hearing that the main villain is still happy for you because of your success, even though it cost her life.
We do what we must because we can. For the good of all of us, except the ones who are dead.
It's a refreshing and fitting way to give an AI villain a change of heart to end off the game. And it helps that the song itself is really, really good.
And the science gets done, and you make a neat gun for the people who are still alive.
Portal is a fantastic game from start to finish, without a single major misstep. But getting back to the title of the video, that still isn't a great explanation. For a game to seep into the public consciousness like Portal did, it needs even more. Memes. Because of how simple and effective Portal was, it was inevitable. Memes, by their very nature, are easy to understand and even easier to spread. And a game based on a simple, pseudoscientific concept built around two circles was really easy to riff on. YouTubers loved them, artists loved them, armchair physicists loved them, Reddit loved them, even the furries got in on the craze. And that's before everything else.
Now you're thinking with portals.
People were taught to love a box with a heart on it in the game itself, so selling plushies was a no-brainer. Turrets are pretty cute too, so people bought those as well. And GLaDOS' lines were just so quotable.
Please note that we have added a consequence for failure. Any contact with the chamber floor will result in an unsatisfactory mark on your official testing record, followed by death. Good luck.
Its sense of humor fit right in with the sarcastic, subversive tastes of an audience that latched on to the likes of Rage Comics and Rick Astley. But of course, we can't overlook the biggest meme of all. The cake is a lie. Honestly, I don't know why this in particular became so popular, but I think I have a few ideas. The phrase is memorable, literally scrawled all over the walls, and it has a simple message. Your efforts are for nothing. It also has some of that intrinsic weirdness of an arrow to the knee, and saying it is an easy way to let the world know that you've heard of a popular thing too. It was versatile enough to be referenced in other memes and even pop up in more games. It filled comment sections and forums and eventually got to a point where people were sick of it, including Valve's writers. The internet works in mysterious ways, and the proliferation of "the cake is a lie" was probably caused by a number of things, but it's impossible to really know. It certainly wasn't intentional. The devs were convinced that this was going to be the big thing for some reason. Regardless, it caught on, and helped Portal reach even more people. At a certain point, the game's notoriety built on itself through these memes and references and word of mouth, becoming one of the most widely known pieces of media from the entire decade. So what happened next, and where is Portal now?
It's been a long time. How have you been?
Portal 2 in its development goes far beyond the scope of this video, but suffice to say, it did a lot to further Portal's influence. A co-op mode, level creator, and a full-length campaign picking up where the first game left off. Well, not really, it takes place in the far future, but not a whole lot changed in that time. The game went on to receive just as much, if not more fame than the original, and in many ways overshadowed it. Whenever Valve touches the Portal IP nowadays, it's the Portal 2 interpretation they use. While we haven't seen another full-length Portal game since 2011, there have been plenty of mods, spin-offs, VR experiences, and pinball games to keep it fresh in our minds. Its influence can still be seen in a ton of other minimalist puzzle games with their own unique mechanics. And even now, on the internet, any promise of cake will still be met with skepticism. 13 years later. My god. Thinking back on how large the whole thing became, it's fun to remember just how small, simple, and focused the point of origin really was. And we'll continue to remember for decades to come, because in our hearts and minds, Portal is
Still alive.
If you enjoyed this video, thanks, I had a lot of fun making it. And if there was anything you thought could have been done better, please let me know in the comments or on my new Discord server, linked in the description. I'll also leave a link to my Twitch page down there, because on
Thursday, January 21st at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time,
I'm going to be playing Narbacular Drop, the student project that eventually became Portal, as well as a number of mods. Hope to see you there.
Are you coming back?
The Aperture Science high-energy pellet seen to the left of the chamber can and has caused permanent disabilities such as vaporization. Please be careful.